I'm standing here on this cold, blustery, late November day on top of the highest ground within James Fort. And these crosses around me represent the first burial ground of the fortification here. So this is the inception of English population in the New World, buried underneath James Fort. These folks were buried in the late summer, fall, and winter of 1607 and into 1608. And there are 36 individuals scattered atop this hill. In this episode of Dig Deeper, I'm going to talk more about our bioarchaeology program and our efforts to both help preserve this in the face of climate change and bring awareness to these grandfathers of American history, the people who lived and died at the beginning of our English history in the New World. So like I said, we're back to excavating burials. Typically, we like to excavate in this particular burial ground in the fall, simply because it's too hot to work inside a structure like this in the summertime. Often the temperatures exceed 100 degrees. And obviously, if you're inside a building such as this, that's too much. But generally, to review, we've been excavating and been committed to at least 3 of these burials a year for the last 10 years. Now, the reason that we've decided to do that is that this 1607 burial ground up here on the hill was underneath the Confederate earthwork, the Fort Pocahontas, which was constructed in 1861. And 8 to 12 feet of fill that were over top of the burial ground protected the burials. Now, when we removed that earthwork and that protection, essentially, it changed the taphonomy, or the conditions in which the burials are lying. And each of these that you can see here in front of me is an excellent example of that. So you see here just below me is a formerly plowed field. And just below that, there's a sort of a gray layer. This is a very organic rich, this top plowed field. The gray sand layer is a leaching zone. And this orange clay, which gets brighter in color and denser as we go down, is the accumulation of organics, or what we call B horizon. So we've got A horizon, E horizon, which is a leaching zone, which compresses over time. So that, these 2 layers are literally about 6,000 years old of human occupation here on this hill. And then you've got the burials excavated into that B horizon. Now, the problem that we have is that meteoric water, or rainwater, is falling and accumulating in the burial shaft, which is clay. It holds water a little bit longer than the surrounding soils, and then dries out. And so wet, dry is absolutely devastating to human remains. They just disappear quickly. And so by us changing the taphonomy, we've decided to excavate those as a long-term bioarchaeology project. Now, the condition of these is already fairly poor, and we have seen over the past 10 years of addressing these some acceleration. But that's why we're digging here. Now, you see around me various holes, which look a bit odd, but what those are post holes for buildings or fences, or even in front of me up there, a palisade. And those are later features that are contaminating, essentially, or have the potential to contaminate the data set. And so we want to remove those first. Now, I know the holes are very discrete here in front of me, and these post holes are outside, but the differing layers or platforms almost that I'm standing down in are for geophysical reasons, so non-invasives. And we have been on the cutting edge of imaging human remains using high-frequency geophysics or ground-penetrating radar for the last 5 or 6 years. And what was once theory when we first started this process with our colleagues at Geophysical Survey Systems Incorporated, GSSI, is now practice, right? So we are imaging these burials to a very high degree, to the point where we can not only tell orientation of the individual, but we're doing a forensic analysis. Like, we're able to determine the condition of the remains. We can determine the distance to target, and that's important. As dirt surgeons, we need to know the patient. And so that's why you're seeing these different levels. These sets of remains were at different levels, and such needed to be dug down so we could image them properly. Again, not only improving our techniques, but giving us a leg up on how fast we dig. And that's important because we have a number of partner institutions that are supporting the dig. And that's Dr. Raquel Flesquez at Dartmouth, Dr. Deborah Bolnick at University of Connecticut. They are ancient DNA specialists here in the United States. We have GSSI, Peter Leach and his team, and we've got Dr. Ashley McCowan from Texas State University, who's our forensic anthropologist in the field and in the lab. All of those individuals have to be scheduled, fly in. The site has to be prepped and ready for them, either it be radar or inspecting the remains in the field initially with Dr. Flesquez for the potential for DNA testing the plaque. And then when Dr. Ashley McCowan comes to do her work in the field, the remains have to be fully exposed. And although that doesn't seem like much, they're on a very tight schedule in which flights have been booked months in advance and schedules have been set out. And so we're very proud to be able to get our work done and get it done properly. The tent functions for a number of different reasons. One, it allows us to work in a quiet environment at any time of the day. So if we don't meet our schedule with these people flying in, and it was the case with this project that for a number of days we worked from 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. We can, there's lights, we have LED lights in here, and it allows us to do our work in both any kind of weather and at any time of day. Also, we're a public archaeology site, and part of our burial permit precludes the public from actually seeing the human remains out of respect and dignity for these individuals and their lives. We're here to share everything about what we're doing, and during the excavation process, we have people outside screening and they're explaining what to do, and we let the public know why they're unable to watch this, and we've never sort of met any resistance. And it is a very delicate process in which you need to be focused, and you need to have that time of quiet and people not yelling out questions, which we love. But in this case, it's a very intense moment, and why we're here. Why, sort of the apex of your career to be working on something so delicate. One thing about the tent too is in 2018, when we were excavating in the church, we implemented the tent to try to lower contamination in excavations in there. But in the interim, we found that our results and our success of recovering and sequencing ancient DNA went up, both with the tent, wearing Tyvek suits, masks, and gloves, and getting to the remains to the lab in a timely manner, within less than 6 weeks. So all of those things have led to an increase. Are any one of them responsible? Well, we don't know, but we're not willing to change our methodologies and find out. And lastly, this shows the public the efforts that we're going to and the respect that we have for excavating human remains as part of our data recovery plan here at the project. As I said outside, these people lived and died at the beginning of our nation. There's not much known about them until we study them and bring that history, and hopefully at some point potential identification of these individuals as time goes on. All of these burials were found between 2003 and 2008, and the majority of them are inside the fort walls. There's 36 individuals, including a gentleman we think is Captain Bartholomew Gosnold right outside the fence. And colonists we think they had buried the individuals, the first 104 men and boys, inside the fort walls because the Virginia Company had told the leadership not to let the Virginia Indians see their losses because that could be used against them. And we think that's why they're sort of cloistered inside the west side of the fortification here. Now, to date, the individuals we have excavated appear to be all males, which match that 104 men and boys, but it is a forensic excavation and anything can happen. And so we're don't always assume that when we're doing our field assessments and assessments in the lab by Dr. Ashley McCowan and Emma Derry, our on-site forensic anthropologist. Now, interestingly, when I say men and boys, that has been the case. We have recovered young individuals, and that certainly has been the case this year. The burial that I'm standing in front of was the one that I was assigned to excavate. This one was senior staff archaeologist Mariana Richardson's burial, and the one in the foreground was Sean Romo, senior staff archaeologist Sean Romo's. Now, the reason we do that is assign a senior team is to make sure that everything goes smoothly given our experience. I have 30 plus years of excavating graves, and there is some delicacy to it, and it always takes quite a bit of experience to get to where you can feel comfortable, the geography of the remains, differing conditions, being aware of body position and things like that. And so this year we assigned 2 staff members to each one, and I think that's critical for the future of this project. As sea level rise and climate change become an issue, I think we will be forced into areas that along the margin of the marsh or in other locations on James Fort where we won't have a choice to preserve burials. And in this case, as a side note, one of the reasons that these are changing so rapidly with climate change is we're getting, as we did last week, actually 3.5 inches of rain in one passing storm. And that, the site just can't handle that overall, but these burials are suffering from that. Now back to the sort of age of these individuals and a rough assessment in the field. Mind you, we just got out of the field last week. The individual that I excavated is in his early to mid 20s. Preliminary assessment appears to be male. The one adjacent to me is a young individual, no more than 15, and the one in the foreground is probably no more than 18. Now again, going back to the records, it's described as 104 men and boys, and we often get asked by the public, what's the role of boys in the early colony? Well, a lot of these young kids, like this individual, were probably serving a gentleman soldier, and they ended up dying in that fall and winter of 1607 and 8. Now, a preliminary assessment, I think, in the field might be appropriate, as I think this is old enough to be a gentleman soldier here, and this may be his assistant. Most of these burials are disparate. They're sort of spread about like these three, and that's often unusual when you're looking at forensics in the field and bioarchaeology. We often see family members are buried in family groups, mom, dad, the kids, etc. And that's not the case with this burial ground. People are scattered about. Now, they are aligned in an east-west fashion, but generally overall, when we see something like this in the field, it may be that people are disconnected or not potentially related to each other. And that could be the case with not only these two, that they have some non-familial working relationship, a gentleman soldier and a servant, or eventually ancient DNA can solve that issue, which is one of the things we're looking at, relatedness within this community, and can we even get DNA from these remains. So currently, Dr. Fleskes and Dr. Bolnick are assessing and getting preliminary results. Everything looks great. We're getting very high recovery rates of ancient DNA. The concept right now is that this burial ground and our future bioarchaeology project, it needs to be a better funded pursuit. The University of Connecticut and Dr. Fleskes at Dartmouth have agreed to continue the study beyond an NSF postdoc grant that Dr. Fleskes received to look at some of these burials. But it is dictating that we sort of take a step back and think about a broader aspect of the study. So there are questions that we can now ask with answers about ancient DNA recovery rates, right? The first question was, can we even get anything at all? And the answer is yes. So other questions we might ask of a population that are very simple are, where are these people from? And that's often something that you'll see on the Discovery Channel or some of these other TV shows where populations like this are traced back to the British Isles. And that's one thing that our lead geneticist, maybe Dr. Turi King at the University of Leicester, has that's a specialty she has within the British Isles. So I think there's a lot of room for us to expand the project in the future, and I'm very excited about the results that we're getting. It's beyond what we thought we might be able to do. Now, in terms of the future, we will continue. It's our wishes, along with the descendant community, to continue excavating in the burial ground. It's hard for us to handle more than 3 a year. I think this year I'm very proud of the team and how we've gotten better, right? So I mark success as not a competition between other archaeologists or other organizations, but I mark success of, are we doing better than we did last year? Are we better than ourselves? Which is a very hard thing to be for this group. And that's the goal next year. Now, a number of things we did a lot better this year was planning a bigger space. So last year, our tent was 16 by 12. This year it's 16 by 20. It went much quicker. We had a detailed engineered plan, and within a few days after that engineered plan was made, I designed this building on SketchUp. We had this thing constructed and skinned out in the field. We planned more time prepping the site, so we hired a good friend of mine, Tim Schmidt from Schmidt Landscaping, was an absolute godsend and got this site stripped down to its formal surface that we encountered in 2008. He did that in 4 hours and got us this perfect 20 by 16 area so we could do our work. So, we did acknowledge we had room for improvement, and you always do. But everything went well this year, and I am very proud of the team of transitioning both from the field and into the lab. Now, I always want to tell the public that what takes us a few hours in the field takes maybe years in the lab. And the next steps for all of this are bone chemistry, So we do a lot of isotopic testing to understand both diet, disease, where these people are from, right? And looking at old world grasses and grains versus new world, that's a carbon issue, and meteoric water consumption, which is heavy oxygen 18. That tells us exactly where they may have been from in the British Isles, or at least where they were born before immigrating over here. So that's the next steps. Stay tuned. I hope to update you on the results. They're absolutely fascinating and very exciting. But that will come over time. And I think that we're very hopeful that an organization or someone out there who has capacity can think about funding our bioarchaeology program and the amazing work that the team is doing here. So stay tuned, and we appreciate you guys watching.